thanks for coming today, guys. We first did this presentation at Chattanooga camp, Drupal camp, back in July, August.
Was that July? No. I don't even remember now.
I don't remember. It's been a while. I guess it was earlier in the spring. But wanted to bring it down here and offer that to your people here. I'm Bill Crum. I'm the Director of Web Applications Tech at Chattanooga State Community College, and we're just up the road a couple hours. And I brought my team with me, and we're all going to be presenting parts of this to you.
Charles Fannin. I'm web developer, web application developer. Pretty much anything you want to call me that does web or application stuff. Whatever. There's too many names out there.
I'm Jeremy O'Brien. I'm a programmer analyst and web developer. That's me with the deflated Drupal thing at DrupalCon in the middle.
Jeremy's our trickster, so you got to watch out. He'll pull pranks and stuff on you when you're not looking. So we'll jump right into this. There's a little bit of a background to web development at Chattanooga State, and we really weren't there at the beginning, so we can only speak to what we found when we got there. So the web presence circa 1990 into the early 2000s, everything was hosted on FrontPage, and the site was hosted on Microsoft infrastructure on IIS, and we're not big fans of Microsoft. So, so there, what we had to work with was not, very exciting. So 2009 is kind of when I became a little bit involved, but not a lot, because I haven't moved into our IT department at that point.
Yeah, this is probably actually when I started working at Chat State. The marketing department hired a programmer, and he came in and he was only there to help migrate it from FrontPage into this Omni Update CMS. And then they hired me on as a student worker to essentially copy and paste HTML from one system to the other system. And that's where I started with web.
And then of course, we had a lot of other sub-sites. Most of those hosted again on, some of them on Linux, some of them on Microsoft, which, again, not so nice. So to give kind of an update to where we are now, we migrated from Omni Update, which, you want to talk about Omni Update a little bit?
Yeah, so if any of you have never heard of Omni Update, it's very big in the educational realm, higher ed, and they claim to be a CMS, and maybe they could have been if it was set up properly, but essentially all the templates were designed in XML and XSLT, and we had to do everything ourselves. Like there was nothing like we're used to at Drupal, where you can go in and you can manipulate views and create your own custom output and everything. It was all done in these templating systems, and then some custom PHP stuff that I would make it look at WordPress for all of our feeds and everything, just using multiple tools to bring it all together. It was just a really horrible system to work in. Everything cost tens of thousands of dollars to add on. If we wanted just a basic feed of something, they wanted to charge us like $5,000 to implement something like that. And so, so yeah, we had to pretty much get rid of that. We had to move something easier, more robust.
Just so we have an idea, I meant to do this at the beginning, but how many of you folks are currently using Drupal? Just show of hands. And how many have what would we call it, lots of saturation in your organization as far as usage of Drupal? A lot? Some wanting more? Wanting more? Okay. All right. Just kind of gives us a feel for people's knowledge.
So that was kind of our thing, is it started in marketing, and it was kind of presented to me first, like, hey, this Omni Update product costs, I forget what the contract was, it was like $10,000, $15,000 a year, and then we had to pay for every little tiny thing that we wanted on top of it. So I offered up, hey, I know WordPress, can we do it in WordPress? And they said, well, let's do some research. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go research like all the top open source things. And in my mind, I'm thinking WordPress because I know it. So we're just going to use WordPress. But just to save face, I was like, all right, I'll do research on all 3 of these.
So that kind of gives you an idea of where we migrated to, but then we'll get into a little bit more depth about how all of that transpired and how we managed to make it happen. So why change? Microsoft, for one thing. We were using a pretty wide range of products. One of them was our web calendar, which is called Beadwork. I don't know if anybody's even familiar with Beadwork, but it was an open source calendaring system, kind of clunky, hard to use. And then we moved to WordPress specifically for web calendaring, and that was kind of a cool calendar.
The WordPress one was cool, but back to Beadwork, this is a prime example of how Omni Update treated us. Is we requested a calendaring system. They were like, okay, well, we'll put one in for you. Well, what we failed to realize is they were just going to go out and find an open source one and then connect it to our existing system. And of course, there was no training. It was really cumbersome to use. And so we just weren't happy. So that was at the point where I was like, all right, well, let's do something in WordPress because, again, I know WordPress.
And then there were significant issues with Omni Update, just not being able to do things we wanted to do, or it was really complicated to do things that we wanted to do. So we would actually end up really hard coding, like custom, I've got an item in there, custom CMS for athletic roster, catalog management and schedule management. I was supporting the back end. At the time, Charles was working in marketing and doing all of the front end stuff and then part of the back end stuff. But then we would support them with custom applications. So we're building all of this stuff really that Omni Update should have done out of the box. And it was really cumbersome and updates were complicated. So there were a lot of reasons why, migration made a lot of sense.
Yeah, a lot of it was consolidation. We wanted to be able to do things on our own.
Omni Update was expensive, extremely expensive. And I think the contract was up for renewal, right?
It was coming up for renewal, and they were debating on if they should renew it or not. So me being the only web guy in marketing, the only one who really managed the website for marketing, they asked what I thought. And this is like the beginning of me learning about open source through WordPress. And I said, well, there's other options out there. Why don't we give it a try? So that's when the research started.
I'll let you talk about
Yeah,
that.
so yeah, like I mentioned earlier, as I did the research, the top 3 were obviously Joomla, WordPress, and Drupal. I believe at that time I knew absolutely nothing about Drupal. But of course I added it because as I was doing research, I learned how prominent it was in the open source community. What really happened is through my research, I discovered how you should get started in the Drupal community, like they were mentioning in this morning's, during lunchtime meeting. So I came across the website where it talked about becoming part of the community. I went down the list of things to do. It said the first thing was like find a meetup, a local meetup. I don't know if anybody here knows Lee Walker of CodeJourneymen. He's in Chattanooga, so he was running the local meetups. I went there, sat through the first meetup. He said, hey, we're going down to Florida in 2 weeks. Do you want to go? I was like, I don't know. I can't afford it myself. Let me talk to my boss, see if they'll cover this. I went back to work, asked them. They said, sure, because if this is something we're going to do, we need to take it seriously. So 2 weeks after my first Drupal meetup, went to Florida, sat through all-day training, through OS training, and learned site building. That's all I learned. Went back to work, came up with a little slideshow to present it to my marketing director, our VP of the department, and the president of the college. And so we just presented this, and top reasons were pretty much security, community support, flexibility, cost effective, and obviously community support. I sold them on the fact that there was like 1 million plus people in the community, so if I needed help, there was plenty of people to reach out to. We had a local group of people who were in Drupal. we could build the things that we wanted to build instead of paying somebody to do it, or at least for the most part, because obviously some things can be really complicated. Security, I sold the fact that they had their own dedicated security team, and that's kind of what sold me at this point. Is I learned that WordPress kind of just was willy-nilly with how they accepted plugins for their content management system, and they could be very vulnerable, and Drupal didn't do it that way. So I stressed that point. Cost effective, I sold them on the fact that, hey, by doing this, all we have to do is pay for hosting. If we go through Pantheon, which is what I was trained on, it'll save us $5,000 a year. So that would knock off that $10,000 plus a year Omni update contract.
This is on our main website. We host a lot of subsites on premise, but for our main website, which is our main promotional vehicle, it makes sense to have that site up and running all the time. It's also the link to our student portal, so the uptime is important. So that was an intentional targeting of that product to go on Pantheon. And it's been great. It's been great from an IT perspective as well.
Yeah, I think pretty much at the point where I learned that, all right, Drupal is dominating these others, I'm just going to focus on this one. And I didn't know anything about Drupal prior to that, but it was a great learning experience. Still is. I still don't think I've made it. I think we have the picture in here, the inverted learning curve. Have y'all seen that yet? I don't think I'm over the lip yet. Yeah, so actually I've already discussed all that, but yeah, researching Drupal, and then we'll go through. So literally it was March. Yeah, it was like 2 weeks. I went from my first meetup to my first camp to presenting it at work to now developing it. And something I've never done before.
And I mean, since most of you are familiar with Drupal, you know about the getting involved page on Drupal.org, and you can get as involved or as uninvolved as you want. I mean, there's lots and lots of places to plug in and spend your time with Drupal and help. So for me, I was when I came on board in the IT shop at Chattanooga State, I was a developer of one. There was nobody else in my area. So a lot of the stuff we were doing, we did a lot of hard-coded sites, did a lot of support. I inherited a lot of projects when I came into that role. Some of them were kind of messy. So I spent a lot of time kind of cleaning that up when I first got there. But then as we made this transition, it made sense to convert some of those projects over to Drupal. But, like he was talking about the inverted learning curve, I was like, I have no idea how to make this work. I know how to write PHP. I'm a PHP developer, but this stuff doesn't make sense to me at all. So there's learning that framework, there's definitely a little bit of a level up required. So,
and I think at this time, whenever I presented, because we had worked together, like he mentioned, prior to that, he would kind of cater toward whatever I needed help with. And I would constantly be asking him, hey, when is there an opening in IT? I want to transfer out of marketing and IT. Let me come over there. I'm like, just beg him, tell him. And so we would go back and forth with that. But he, whenever I mentioned, hey, I think we're going to convert this website into Drupal, what do you think? He's like, I guess it's fine. I haven't used it since.
Yeah, I'd been exposed to it. And if you look on my profile, it says on Drupal.org for 11 years, 7 months. But it's kind of it looks like, wow, he's done this for a long time. I used it a little bit for a small project, and it was kind of like a site build, and then I didn't touch it for years. I don't even remember. Probably 5. I don't know. I can't even remember that part of my life anymore. But yeah, I mean, so I had been exposed to it, but I didn't know anything about custom module development or any of that. So a lot of that was, I started attending meetups and started doing a lot of self-training, spun up a lot of Drupal sites, started up from scratch, play around with it, mess it up, blow it away, start over again, finally started to get it right, but that was definitely an adjustment for our IT department as well. So selling, that's going to be all you.
Yeah, I kind of briefed on it. Yeah, it was mainly just figuring out as much information as I could and bringing it to the ones who made the final decision. And it just took a matter of finding out the facts and how am I going to save them money, and how much support are we going to get in return. And that was obviously for our case. We were finding with Omni Update that we weren't getting the support we wanted, obviously without paying a large chunk of money. And I mean, we're a small community college. We can't afford to pay you every time we ask you a question. And so it was just selling that I have local support. I have a huge community I can reach out to. We have camps. We have a crazy amount of camps in the Southeast that we can go to. Yeah, the contribution policies, that kind of reflects on the security stuff. It's just not loose code submitted to the community. It's actually moderated. Yeah, this comes to our big selling points. So we had a VP who went to a prestigious college. So of course I went and I was like, all right, what prestigious colleges uses Drupal? So I found a list of them and I presented that. Obviously you can see a trend here. I was just catering the sales toward what these people knew of. And then we had our governing body is the Tennessee Board of Regents. And I reached out to them and asked them what they thought about us. And at the time we had a gentleman named Matthew Gann running the system up there who said, actually, I just converted like 40 plus sites into Drupal. I love Drupal. I can advocate it for you. I was like, sweet. So you're saying everything I've done for the past month was a waste of time. All I had to do was call you. And so, yeah, and actually now we have Joel here. He's our governing body up there now for all of our Drupal products at TBR, and he's all for it too. And I mean, it makes it a lot easier whenever the top guy is using the product you're wanting to buy into. So
definitely find an advocate. If you have someone that's high placed and is a big supporter of Drupal or whatever you're wanting to sell, it definitely helps to have that advocate.
So one thing I didn't want to do is, because I know we have a trend on our campus where people just go and do whatever they want and they don't really reach out to IT and ask for their backing on this, because I mean that takes time out of their lives that they have to do things and they have tons of products. So that's when, fortunately, we already had a good relationship, and I reached out to him and I said, well, how does this work into your guys' progress or projects or whatever it is that you guys are working on? And so that's where he's.
So yeah, selling to us was relatively easy since I was the only guy doing web development. And my boss was basically like, I don't know anything about it. I trust you. Do you think this is the best way for us to go? And, after doing our own research and, figuring out how, and plus I'm having to support them, right? Because they're in a different department. So on one hand, I didn't feel like I had a choice, but on the other hand, it was a good choice anyway. So
well, there was a benefit that we were moving it off campus too.
Exactly. So it definitely was a good thing for us, because at the time we weren't really using a CMS of any type for our other projects. So it helped us to migrate some of those projects over to a good solid CMS, and it allowed us to be able to improve our security, workflow, collaboration, because we were working on the same platform. We could share things. We're committing our code in common repositories. So, Charles could say, I really don't understand why this isn't working. Can you take a look at it? It was real easy for me to go in and look at it.
Well, and one thing I think I forgot to mention is I did mention consolidation, but I didn't explain the plethora of things that we had just for marketing. Is we had the main.edu website that was in OU campus. We had a calendaring system in WordPress, and then I think we had something else in WordPress.
We had a blog in WordPress too.
And then we had a custom PHP application for managing the catalog and then the athletics roster. So it was like, all right, so we took all of that and migrated it all into Drupal. And so, I mean, it was really easy to do since we had the capability of creating custom content types and then importing the data.
And all during this time, you know, Charles and I are working closer and closer together on projects, and he would keep coming back to me and say, when are you going to get me over there? I got to get out of this place. I want to work, you know, I want to work in the same organization. And we just didn't have the opportunity at the time, but we eventually, I think we kind of made it happen because we kept asking, and we moved that way. And so
for a few months, I just started telling my department, I've got to go over there and work on a project. And I would just go sit in his office and work.
yeah, so we had kind of a pseudo team, but we wanted a developer team where we were all under the same umbrella.
It does, it makes it easier. A lot of folks told me, oh, you probably want to stay in marketing. It's a great place for you. But from my perspective, I wanted to do more back-end stuff. Less, I mean, I like the front-end stuff too, but I wanted to learn more about the back-end. And I felt like I had nobody in marketing to assist with that. So I needed to go somewhere where I can work with somebody with that mindset.
So the other part of selling to us is that we have a lot of on-premise systems. So we use an ERP system called Banner, and we use Active Directory for all of our authentication. We have a lot of single sign-on products, and then there are ad hoc needs and other things. So when we put our team together, we pulled Jeremy, and Jeremy was already in IT.
Yeah, I was, of the three of us, I'm the newest to Drupal. I was hired into the college as a programmer on our legacy system, which is Banner. It's our ERP system, which we use pretty much to run the entire college on. It handles the student records, it handles financial aid, the accounts receivable via the bursar's office, human resources. I mean, it's essentially, I guess you could compare it to, say, SAP or PeopleSoft and some other systems. And in the educational sector, there's really only two big players out there, just because of all of the mergers and acquisitions that have happened over the years. There's a Lucian Banner, which is what we have, or there's PeopleSoft, which ironically was just owned by Oracle, but ironically, our ERP system runs on top of a Oracle database. So I was hired in as a programmer for the legacy systems, and then got to work with these guys, and now I'm essentially taking a lot of my ERP now, my knowledge on the ERP system, and integrating it with Drupal, because I think if anybody's that's used, I think everybody in the room's probably used an ERP system at one point in their life or career. It can do a lot of things pretty good, but it doesn't do everything great. And so what you find that if your customers or users want new things, you have three choices. You either go to the vendor and they'll sell it to you or develop it for you. You go to a third party, or you develop it yourself. And with Drupal, we're finding really flexible ways to interface with our ERP system, so that, especially for the ETL, the extract, transform, and load, our users can come to us with requests, requirements, or proposals, and then we can essentially look at the data in the system and try to develop an interface via Drupal, and have it interact with Active Directory or pretty much a lot of the other tools that we have available with us to try to make things to try to meet the needs of our users without having to either tell them no or say it's going to cost so many thousands of dollars. So it's really made our users happy, and I think it's really helped us move forward, especially in the educational sector. Usually it's we're as a whole probably not as advanced as far as the private sector on some of the systems.
Yeah, so like he said, there are we get a lot of requests for kind of weird things. You know, we can get this information in Banner, but we want to be able to do it more on demand, or expose some of that information to students or to, you know, instructors in a way that's secure, and doesn't leave Banner exposed. So we'll take subsets of data and we can use Drupal as a portal to, you know, to present that information. So an example of that, you know, it's nice to talk about it, but it's probably even better to give you an example of how we're using that. So we have, our student portal is actually built in Drupal, and I can tell a little story about that later if time permits. But when the students log in, they use it for single sign-on functionality into various other applications, but then we also want to be able to pull in information that's useful to them. So like when they log in, who's their advisor? And we use success coaches on our campus that help them through the registration process and stuff. So who's their success coach? So we have widgets that we've built, and we have some other things that we're working on their application status. And we're pulling that data in. When they log into Drupal, then they see this information presented to them in a clean way. So we have a third-party product that was designed for, but because of some situations, we were forced to spin up a Drupal student portal, and it's actually been working really well. We've had a lot of people come to us and ask us if we're just going to stay on that portal as opposed to going to the next version of the other. I don't want to name it right now, but it's an Illusion product, and we may end up having to go to it, but or we probably are going to have to go to it. But it's interesting that our users are actually very positive about the Drupal portal. So that's cool. That's big when my bosses hear that. They go, okay, I guess we made the right decision.
And just to touch on what Bill was saying, the Drupal interfaces that we've created has really, the flexibility of it has been crucial to us as far as trying to meet our goals and our student needs, because I don't know if you're aware, but it used to be, as far as financial aid, essentially when a person gets, people qualify for financial aid, they get the financial aid, it goes to the college, ultimately gets paid. But the Department of Ed has recently changed a lot of the rules, so a lot of our funding isn't necessarily how many people are in our seats. It's based on outcomes. So Bill had mentioned the success coaches. Essentially, we are able to provide real-time information ad hoc to our advisors, our success coaches, and to our students to help them meet their needs, essentially to succeed in their classes and ultimately get that degree and move on.
So, and we talked about Active Directory. Does everybody know what Active Directory is? I mean, we use it for our centralized authentication. So we don't, basically our developer team doesn't have to worry about, we install LDAP module, configure everything, now everybody can log into the portal. So that saves us a lot of time. So what are the nuts and bolts of converting to Drupal? I think you kind of touched on a little bit of it, but.
Yeah, so that's Lee Walker next to me. That was not my first trip to Florida. That was probably my 5th trip to Florida. But yeah, he's who we contracted with. We went and spent some time with him because again, I didn't know anything about Drupal. I wanted to go in learning Drupal and doing things the proper way. He wasn't quite caught up with the new methods or procedures of how to use Drupal. So I talked to him. I was able to convince our department to contract with him. We did a 3-day site discovery for him to teach us everything from like the tools that we need to like how Pantheon works in the workflow. Because prior to that, I think we had OU campus was only set up on one system, and I was backing things up to like flash drives. and then like putting them in a drawer. And this was a system that was left to me, a non-developer, from a developer. And he's like, yeah, just put them in there, run some commands, and it'll back it up. I didn't know what the commands did. I just copied whatever he told me to do, and then it backed it up. And I was like, all right, this one's Tuesday, so put that one down there. So I had like 5 of these things, and each one was for a different day of the week. And so that was our previous backup system. So of course we wanted to put it in something that was a little better at that. So we learned Pantheon. I learned that I should probably get a Mac so I can go learn. So I had to learn how to use a Mac. So I converted from a Windows machine to a Mac machine. I learned command line. I learned how to use the tools like Git and Drush and all that stuff. All that with given, I think I mapped out about a year's worth of learning and migrating and everything, because I was like, it's mostly just me for the marketing side of the website. And I think this is about how much time I need. And then my director's like, great, do it in 3 months. I was like, yeah, okay. So I did the best that I could. Our navigation is jacked, but at least the content is in there. But yeah, this is the learning curve I was talking about. So I'm probably the one dangling by the string. I'm not quite there yet. But yeah, so learning the Pantheon workflow, the Git workflow, jumping in the PHP storm, learning the IDE that is good for PHP development, learning custom module development, and then of course all the command line stuff, SAS, something I never heard about before, Nginx. I was like, but I use Apache. Everything was just like, picked it up, and I had to run with it and figure out as much as I could, and a lot of trial and error in the migration process. Fortunately, I found a module. I actually don't recall what it's called now, but there was a module that allowed you to scrape static websites and migrate it over to Drupal. So essentially what I did is I downloaded our entire website through FTP and got it local, so I had something to test with a lot. And I was able to use that, and eventually after about a week of testing with it, I was able to get it to scrape it good enough, not perfect, but good enough that I could get the content into some custom content types and everything. And I think the only issue I had was with the images. All it did was link to images, and it dumped all the images into a separate folder. It wasn't managed through Drupal, so none of our images were managed through the CMS. So that was a headache, but we got over it.
So the build team at the time in marketing was one designer developer, which was Charles, another designer that's no longer there, and he was great. We missed him a lot, but he hated command line stuff. He's like, I hate this command line crap.
Especially Git merge conflicts.
Yeah, he was not, that was not his thing. So there was the challenge of him learning that, and then also us, making sure that we had to go back and fix those conflicts at times. But I mean, it went okay. But everybody's on, that learning curve, and everybody is getting to the top of that mountain at a different point. So that's always a challenge. And it was a challenge for me because I was used to doing my own thing. Now I've got a team of people that I have to work with. And I mean, fortunately, we already had a well-established relationship, but I still had other projects that I was managing too, other projects other than the college website. So that's always kind of an interesting transition. Change is always, I've heard someone say that change is a lot like grieving, and you have to go through the stages of change, just like you have to go through the stages of grieving. So no matter what it is, that's always kind of a
I like Dr.
process.
Tiding's quote. She said, change is normal, and I want us to be real normal.
Yeah. So our major challenges, migration of content from the enterprise CMS, which was Omni Update. Fortunately, you felt most of that pain, and I didn't have to worry about it.
Well, plus the WordPress sites and stuff. I honestly don't know that we migrated too much. I think for that, what I did is I just let our current WordPress, the calendaring system especially, just let that one kind of, like, don't put any more in there, start putting them in here, but we'll just let those run out. So I think that's how we handled that. It was just much easier instead of trying to figure out how to map all that and migrate it.
The catalog integration, there's an API for the catalog system that we use. And the things that they wanted us to do were more complicated than really the API, I think, was designed for. So that, and we use that same process right now with the catalog, but I think we're trying to look for
Yeah.
a better solution.
Well, they released the API and it was on version 1.
Still on version
And it's still
1.
on version 1.
Yeah, so
We've not done anything with it. That was years ago.
it does what it does, and we kind of think it should stand alone, but that's more of a political fight than a developer fight. So, and then also building an enterprise level site while we're learning, on this learning curve, that was definitely a challenge.
Like I said, I think the worst thing for the amount of time we were given and for the amount of stuff that we had to learn and get done, I can say that the only thing I'm unhappy with is the navigation. The navigation is just horrendous. To this day, because we've not gone back and really messed with it. We're just waiting until we get to a point to release it on Drupal 8. But other than that, I think everything else went quite well. Maybe we could have handled content management a little bit better as far as letting folks own and manage their own content, but that was more of an internal decision. And in the previous whatever the title was, I don't know what the title was. Web
manager, whatever.
I don't know. Whatever the previous title was for the web manager that was there.
Webmaster.
Yeah, webmaster. That was her decision, and she didn't want anybody to manage their own content. She wanted to have the last say so and everything, and I was just like, okay.
We're kind of drifting from that model, and I think we're getting.
Yeah, we're trying to encourage people to. Because we're not the content experts. Even if it comes to you to approve, you don't know what the heck what are you approving? Spelling errors, grammar errors? They should be able to handle that stuff.
Especially in a higher education institution. So we do support a lot of other projects, Drupal projects now on campus. Our IT services site is all built in Drupal. We'll be looking to move that from 7 to 8 soon. We have a lot of internal workflows that we do. So we do, if you're a new employee and you need IT access, there's some workflows that we have built for that. We built a hardware inventory system for the IT department. As far as campus focused, there's TigerWeb, which is our student portal that I referenced. Our campus directory, a project we launched just within the last couple months is called the Daily Bengal, and that's our intranet. It's our employee portal, and that's all in 8, in Drupal 8. Another big one is the TCAT time tracking system. We have a technical school on campus, and the way that they do their classes is different. Everything is by clock hours, so the time tracking system allows the students to clock in and out, and then it also keeps track of their progress as they go throughout the semester. So that's a huge project. That one's been 2 years in development. We finally launched with all of our TCAT courses this past fall. So that's a big one, and it continues to be something we're developing.
Before it was pretty much a manual process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they used Excel to track all of their hours. And it was this big, huge Excel file. I think it was up to several gigs. There was so much data in it. And so we kept putting it off, but they finally came to us and said, we've got to do something. Can you build something for us? And
Windows.
yeah, it was pretty bad. But Drupal's allowed us to build a really, really good, solid solution for them. And they were a little resistant to it at first, but now that they've been using it and we put some improvements in, they're really, really happy with it.
Plus the reports and dashboards.
Yeah. So for future projects, all new sites are in Drupal 8. We'll be converting a lot of our 7 sites to 8. We'll probably hit the low-hanging fruit ones first, but then the more complicated ones will follow suit. And another big project for us is to convert. We have a lot of paper forms. You would think that a technical college would be a little bit more advanced, but a lot of our forms, our internal forms, are still on paper. So over the next couple years, we're going to take a lot of those paper forms and we'll be converting those to workflows, and we're using Drupal as the engine to drive that. So a lot of exciting things. Obviously, Drupal has been a huge benefit to our organization. I think a lot of our employees don't even realize what they're using. They just know that it works, and
That's always the thing, right? Sell them the solution, not the software.
Yeah. Most of them, if you mention Drupal, they just kind of give you a weird look. They're like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, my marketing director hated the word Drupal.
Yeah.
She's like, why? I was like, that's just what they call it.
Any questions, comments, things we can answer for you or help you with?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question. I saw in the beginning that you said, I think on one of the very first slides, that you use Pantheon for the main site, but not everything else.
Mhm.
Correct.
It's hosted locally.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you all decide to do that? Not have everything hosted?
Mostly cost, because we're a community college. It gets really expensive when you host, and the other thing is scale. So some of our websites aren't very big. We may not have, we may only have 100 users on something. Like our TCAT time tracking system, it's all behind our firewall. We don't need that exposed outside. So it only makes sense for us to host that internally in our data center. And we have a pretty robust data center.
Yeah, we've already had, we've got quite a pretty large infrastructure already built out.
Yeah.
So really the scalability and cost, I think,
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
when you're looking at the pros and the cons.
Yeah, we build all of our servers in a VM farm. So that was more cost effective for us to keep some of those. I'd like to push for some of our portals to go out onto Pantheon, just because it helps with disaster recovery and stuff. So we'll be pushing maybe it depends on how the student portal project goes, and maybe the employee portal at some point we may push outside. A lot of the internal ones, the workflows and things, we like to keep internally because it's behind our firewall. We have a little bit more security. But yeah, if we had lots and lots of budget, I'd probably push a lot more out there, just because Pantheon's great. It makes it really easy to deploy. So anyway, that's kind of why.
Yes.
Being a community college, do any of your courses teach Drupal?
No, we actually don't.
We don't. We had an instructor, and then I think he was a department head as well.
Yeah, he was really on board.
Was really interested in it, and then he left. He went to work for a company in town.
Yeah,
and
we got as far as to where we would hold our meetups at the school.
Mm-hmm.
It only happened twice, but because shortly after that he left.
he was actually given extra credit for students to come to the meetups, which was cool. It was great to have them there.
We do collaborate, though, with our IT instructors on campus. When we have our camp, we invite them and they bring their students.
We help organize and do the Chattanooga camp if anybody can ever make it that way. We don't know when our next one will be. It'll be sometime next year, but we're not sure of the date. But we market it quite heavily on campus to try to get as many students as we can involved. I'm not sure what it would actually take to get it into a course.
Well, if there's more demand in the marketplace, I'm sure they serve the local market, and so I think really that really drives it too.
One thing that we could do is we have a continuing education department where if somebody wanted to teach Drupal, they can come in and set up the curriculum and then be like, all right, well, we're going to do a Drupal course for a week or whatever, and then they're allowed to charge whatever they want. But of course, again, like Jeremy said, we have to have the interest. And it's not, Chattanooga is not a really big Drupal place yet. We do have CodeJourneymen there who has his own Drupal firm, but his work is in Knoxville. So
it may eventually get there, though. We have a lot of technology, and they keep our local power utility, they keep saying that we have the fastest internet. It kind of goes back and forth between Google cities, kind of a rivalry that's saying who has the fastest internet. But we have a lot of incubators in town and stuff. So
we have our local electric board actually provides fiber in Chattanooga, and so we get gig internet through them. Any more questions? Yeah.
So I work with a few different institutes, and I've heard some frustrations with on the update of proprietary systems, like you guys have mentioned, especially when it comes to trying to figure out, all right, I need this new module, I need this new functionality, how do I get it to happen without causing Canvas a huge build? As a result, some of the folks I've seen with that, they have people spin up their own like rogue sites. So you'll have like, you know, a Drupal site here, a WordPress site there. One place I worked with, they had somebody spun stuff up on Squarespace. So like, you know, that's not really where you want your .edu pointed. But have you guys, did you notice that before your transition? And since then, have you noticed more people coming back to the fold?
We have a lot less of that issue now because they know that we have a developer team. Mm-hmm. So the word's kind of gotten out, hey, if you need something, go talk to them, because they know how to do it, and they know how to do it right.
I think the other thing too is have a policy in place.
Yeah.
Recently, our marketing department set out a policy that, I mean, it should, if you're doing something like that, it should stem through marketing, and then if they need the technical side, then they'll come to us, sort of thing. I mean, we're not trying to police anything, we're trying to be consistent. I mean, that's what your brand is about, is being consistent. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as requests come in, we'll kind of evaluate, so is this something that's appropriate for the marketing site? Okay, great. We'll send it to the web coordinator. That was the position, website coordinator.
That sounds good.
We'll direct that to him and let him kind of manage that. If it's something that's more IT related, then we'll work with them and we'll sit down with the customer and figure out what the project is and how to make it happen.
And just to tack on what Bill had said, as far as the word getting out, we've built relationships with several of our customers throughout the departments, throughout the college, and both on the faculty side and on the staff side. So I think we have pretty good working relationships, and I think they have the confidence in us if they come to us with with a proposal or they need a solution to. We do our best to provide it.
The relationship makes a big difference.
Yeah.
As you develop those relationships with your different departments, I think we have a good working relationship with all of them. I don't know of one that's really, a difficult. It may take more time with some departments, but we have really, really good.
We're also learning that the CFO really likes our team, so that's good.
Yeah. We try
that might be helpful in the future.
We try to keep her happy. Jeremy knows her executive secretary really well, and she has a request. We try to fulfill it quickly.
That way we can keep coming to these camps.
Exactly. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How did you guys prioritize what you converted to Drupal and when?
Well, back at the time when we were doing the marketing site, that was number one. For me, number two was getting the IT site converted. And then a lot of the other sub-sites were things that were attached to the main website. So those had to be done at the same time.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff was happening kind of concurrently.
It kind of just fell in place because the contract was ending on our current system, and we wanted to go on something more affordable and robust. So we made that the priority. That one just kind of fell in place. And then after that, once the experience was there, it was like, all right, what's the next thing we can do or practice on or whatever.
And plus,
that one was kind of given to us, the priority, unfortunately, or fortunately.
And plus some of the existing things that are out there, decisions have been made whether they want to put more time in development into some of these older technologies that worked great when they were implemented maybe years ago, but now they're taking more support or there's incompatibilities. We'll make the push to say, hey, maybe we should do this in Drupal, and they're usually pretty responsive to that. As
far as priority now, I'll I'll look at the capacity that we have with the three of us, and we'll determine what everybody's working on and kind of try to. Obviously, if it's a small site and it's not doing something terribly important, we're going to push that down a little bit, or we'll just say, hey, we've got this and this ahead of it, but we'll get to it. And I mean, it's a community college, so people are pretty understanding and flexible on time. Now, if we were out in enterprise, we'd have to do a little bit more, probably formal project management, and we'd have to do a lot more evaluation of projects and stuff. But fortunately, that's one of the benefits of working at a community college. We don't make as much money, but we have a little bit better quality of life, I think, sometimes too. So.
Yeah, then we always have projects like they do this thing in Chattanooga now called the Chat Lead. Or is it Chattanooga State that does that?
Chat Lead. No, it's us.
So, so they put together a group of people that want to come up with ideas to help better the college, and most of the time, the ideas come to our team so that we can execute whatever their idea is. So that happens pretty much every single time they do those things. And that was where what we call the Daily Bangle, our employee portal, came from. And so they came up with the idea, and then we executed on it and built it exactly how they wanted it, which was very simple. Just, we want a place to put our content. And we kept it simple intentionally because it's like, y'all don't know how you want it yet. You don't know how you're going to use it. So we'll just allow feature requests come in.
And they wanted the users to be the content managers.
So that was actually at least my first practice of putting the content back in the user's hands and trying to set up workflows for that and everything. Getting that going.
There's a little push-pull on that, because what they view as a priority is not always a priority for us. So, I mean, we have to kind of manage, their expectations versus our expectations, and that works out okay most of the time. But, we can't obviously have 10 chat lead projects come in and them all be done at the same time. So, same thing that everybody deals with. Yes, sir.
When you first built the site, how long did it take from start to finish, and then did you have to do all the content yourself?
Yeah, so for the very first site we did, the .edu was the main primary marketing site for the college, the forward-facing site for students, potential students, and parents for their students. I don't know if you were here at the part where I mentioned it, but I didn't know anything about Drupal when we did it. Once I started learning about Drupal, I reached out to our local community and went and got help. And so I had to learn how to use a different computer, because I was on Windows machine, but I was learning everybody was developing using a Mac. And I was like, well, I'm going to get the same system that the developers are using, who I'm learning from. So I had to learn that. I had to learn all the command line tools. I had to learn the Drupal system and everything. And so I planned for about a year for us to do it, so I can learn and migrate everything. And I was given 3 months to do it, to learn and migrate everything. And so so pretty much 3 months we did it in. And that was learning all the tools, all the new environments, and how to actually develop with Drupal and migrating all the content over.
It was quick.
So you didn't have to manually add any content?
No, so what I did is I discovered a module that allowed you to scrape static sites. And I just tinkered with it for about a week until I got it the closest that I thought was good enough. And it allowed me, what I did is I grabbed our website through FTP, because it was all static through the previous system. And I kept it local on my machine so I can keep testing. And I could essentially point this module to that directory, and it would suck all the files in. And the basic part of it was you told it where your content essentially lived, like your opening and closing tags. And it would just grab all that information and put it in whatever content type you wanted to map it to. And fortunately, all of our stuff was basic pages. So it was really, really simple after about a week of tinkering with the module. And I was able to strip out all of the JavaScript and inline CSS and images or media and all that stuff. So we were able to migrate it fairly easy. So no manual content copy and paste or anything like that.
So the previous site wasn't built with any CMS?
It was in a CMS, but the product that it was in was OU Campus, and it was built using XML and XSLT style sheets. And so whenever it was just all static, it didn't store it in a database. It was just all rendered or parsed out statically.
It was ugly.
So I had to find something that would scrape a static site, and fortunately I got lucky.
It was an ugly system, not one we ever want to go back to.
It's not, and in fact, I don't think it's compatible with 7 anymore, unfortunately. I'll look it up again, and I'll try to give it to you, because I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And we didn't mention it, but
This is all our contact info. Our slides are on the campsite. So if you want to get in touch with us, feel free to reach out. There's that same slide at the beginning and end of the presentation. So, any other questions?
got about
Thanks
3
so
more
much.
minutes. Thank you.